Joe and I have some roster decisions to talk about here for the Mariners, including the non-tender deadline as well as the Rule 5 deadline, both of which occur this week. We'll talk about who the Mariners decided to not add to their roster, as well as some guys they could add from the non-tender list. We're then going to break down Josh Naylor's contract even further. We made a short about it yesterday, but we're going to break down the contract and what that means for the rest of this offseason for the Mariners. We'll give you guys our FanDuel favorites, and then we're going to look at some offseason plans from a couple of other content creators who made plans just like we did. We'll compare them to our plans. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 251 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network and presented by FanDuel. And this is the Tucker the Dog episode of the podcast. Tucker apparently played a pretty pivotal role in keeping Josh Naylor in Seattle. So shout out to Tucker, the absolute dog.
He's not a goat. Yeah,
he's got not a goat. Yeah,
he's got that dog in him. Like, actually, you know what I mean? That just all the press conference stuff, all the social things that have been happening with Naylor, from the hype videos that the Mariners social team has put out, it's all been very good. The press conference, like, it's all been things that make you want to run through a brick wall, it feels like. So again, shout out to Naylor, shout out to the socials team, shout out to Tucker for keeping, basically guaranteeing Naylor stays a Seattle Mariner. But unfortunately, Tucker cannot protect all the people within the organization, Colton. There was a 40-man deadline. Players that were Rule 5 eligible, they need to be added to the 40-man, or else they would be, eligible to be picked up in the Rule 5 draft from other teams. And the Mariners didn't add any of their previously existed players in the organization, all of which top 30 prospects, of like the notable ones. They didn't add any of them to their 40-man. Instead, they traded for Alex Hoppe from the Boston Red Sox. They gave up Luke Heyman, who was a 2025 draftee, a catcher, maybe grades out better as a first baseman in the future, but out of the University of Florida. We didn't have him in the top 30. I think Locked On had him in their top 30, and a prospect that, given a year's time, who knows where he would have been within the Mariners system. But the Mariners did end up trading for Alex Hoppe, who's got a good fastball, a good cutter. It's just a command issue that he needs to work on, it seems like. And it seems like similar to the Robinson Ortiz, probably a little bit better than Robinson Ortiz move that they made last week, as a guy in the pile. This is like the top of the pile. We're not picking from the bottom. We climbed up the pile to grab Alex Hoppe and potentially have him in the Mariners bullpen. Corresponding move was designating Taylor Saucedo for assignment. So with all that out of the way, Mariners chose not to add the likes of Michael Morales, Marcelo Perez, Luis Suispel, Carlos Jimenez, Victor Javier Labrada, and our darling dear Tyler Cleveland. They did not protect any of them for being eligible to be drafted in the Rule 5 draft, instead choosing to opt with Alex Hoppe, which I don't think is a bad thing. It's just we have no emotional ties to Alex Hoppe. Truth be told, of the 6 guys that I named, I probably would have just protected Tyler Cleveland if I'm the Mariners. Maybe Michael Morales, just because he has the most prospect pedigree. It's just he hasn't really, he's kind of gone down like the Taylor Dollard route, where there are a couple other pitchers around him in the organization as far as prospects are concerned, and he unfortunately kind of has not ascended. He hasn't grown. He's kind of plateaued, and it's a little bit different for Dollard. Injuries and everything like that kind of mitigated his growth. But what do you make of the Mariners and the players that'll be eligible to be taken from their organization in the Rule 5 draft? And of course, for those of you that don't know, Rule 5, if they are picked up by another team, they have to stay on like their 26-man roster, and they have to be on the 40-man. Like, if they get designated for assignment, the Mariners will then get them back. So it's like there's a chance that if one of these guys does get taken, that they don't stay with the existing club. I think the Mariners picked up, he was a reliever from the Cubs 2 years ago or 3 years ago that didn't.
Taylor Clark? Is that
something? Clark sounds right. I don't. Let us know in the comments what the name is. But
Johan Ramirez was a Rule 5 guy back in the day. Yeah. I mean, there haven't been like super notable Rule 5 guys in the past. Josh Hamilton was a Rule 5 guy, which is crazy.
Throwback.
Yeah, but Yeah, the Rule 5 draft will take place at the end of the winter meetings next in a couple of weeks. And yeah, the Mariners didn't add Tyler Cleveland, and that's the only guy that I could see potentially getting picked up. A reliever, a guy you can stash in a bullpen for the majority of a year. The point of the Rule 5 draft is so that guys don't get stuck down in the minor leagues and not have a chance to go play somewhere. So if they get picked up in the Rule 5 draft, they get to go play in the major leagues. That's basically why they do it. So
Mhm.
teams can't just stash guys forever. Um, Otherwise, other than Tyler Cleveland, I don't think anybody else would get picked up. Again, they have to remain on your roster the entire year, unless they get injured, of course. And I think that for the Mariners, Tyler Cleveland's a guy they could probably. I mean, we were talking about calling him up last year. They could probably use him out of the pen this year if they wanted to.
Mhm.
And I think that like a team like the White Sox or the Rockies or someone like that would be more than willing to take a guy like Cleveland. There's been a lot of other trades recently basically around the league because of this deadline, because teams either had to add them to the 40 man or trade them somewhere so they could get added to the 40 man there, blah, blah, blah. And so you saw a lot of moves, obviously Hoppy being one of them. But yeah, the non-tender deadline as well is one that's coming up on Friday. And that's another spot where the Mariners could add a bunch of guys to their roster and potentially lose some as well. Notably, like Trent Thornton is a non-tender candidate. They also have Gregory Santos as a non-tender candidate, though I think he probably gets tendered. Um, Taylor Saucedo is a non-tender candidate. Obviously, he's already been DFA'd, but
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot of guys on there, but Joe, there are a few that I think are interesting in the relief market in terms of the rule or the non-tender guys. There's really no one in like there no backup catchers or anything, and there are some guys that are obviously not going to be tendered. There are other guys that are probably going to be tendered, but generally these are guys that had rough years,
Yeah.
but there's still some value in here. I mean, for example, looking at the right-handed relievers, Yanir Cano was bad this year,
Yeah.
and he's set to make $1.8 million, and they have him as a potential non-tender by the Orioles. And I think that's a guy that if you pick him up, I like
You
you
can
could
fix
probably
him.
turn him around. Yeah, it's 1 year, and so I think that that's something the Mariners would look at. But also at the same time, will the Orioles non-tender him because they probably also think they can fix him? So
Yeah.
it's an interesting situation. But yeah, there's plenty of guys on here that I think make a lot of sense.
I mean, there's a couple familiar names. I mean, Matt Festa for the Guardians is a non-tender candidate. I don't know if they're again, we're just looking at names here as far as what? What
Do
what
you
was
know
that
what
face for?
number Matt Festa wore with the Mariners?
Probably 67, Colton. Jake Bird, apparently he's a Yankee. I didn't know that. So
What?
that's crazy news to me, but he's a non-tender candidate as well. A guy that you have been in love with for probably a year and a half, 2 years now. Left-handed reliever for the Marlins, Andrew Nardi. If he is non-tendered, I mean, you just probably swap him for Saucedo as far as the way the like fit works, I guess. But I'm surprised to hear you say that there's not really a backup catcher that you'd be interested in as far as like non-tendered stuff is concerned. Like just as far as organizational depth, like again, I'm not looking at the Jonah Heim where it's $6 million. Like dude's getting non-tendered. He's not worth that money. But I feel like if I mean Alex Jackson could be a fun one. Could be could be an interesting one. But I think like the three that are making below 2 million that I would be interested in, Riley Adams, Luis Campusano, and Alex Jackson, as far as just like a backup to Cal Raleigh, if you are under the impression or the under the assumption that the Mariners still theoretically could trade Harry Ford this offseason. I think dabbling in the catcher market here as opposed, I mean, again, it's just like they'd just be treated as free agents if they do get non-tendered. So it's not like this big discrepancy between who is available actually in the catcher market and free agency. But I don't know. I think that was an interesting one. I mean, Ryan Mountcastle is an interesting
Yeah.
one. I mean, he's expensive. He's $8 million. Like you already have Josh Naylor there, obviously, but something that I just think would be there's just interesting names up and down this, like Luis Garcia, guy that
Yeah.
we talked
Hey,
about trading
rough
for
year.
the Nats I mean last year, and I think partway through the year before that as well. $7 million.
Andy
He's not,
Ibanez.
yeah, like there's a lot of names, and it's like it's always an interesting time when non-tenders and Rule 5 stuff kind of roll around because you don't know what teams are going to act in that market. But the Mariners typically have not, at least in the last, handful of years, have not really dabbled too much.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't mention the guy with the nicest stroke in the game, Reese McGuire. He's from Washington. He went to
Yeah.
Kentwood or something like that. I played against him once. Um, yeah, Reese is an option. He probably, of all those guys you mentioned, may have had the best year as well. So maybe bring him home. But yeah, there's plenty of guys on here that I do think make sense. But there's also plenty of guys that the Mariners just already have in their organization that could probably replace some of these guys. I mean, again, you could just sign them to minor league deal, or you can't sign them to minor league deals because you're going to have to pay them no matter what. You're going to have to pay them the money that they would have been making had they been tendered or arbitration. So
Yeah.
anyway, there's guys that are on here. Obviously, it's not till Friday, so we'll have to wait and see, and we'll probably talk about it more on Sunday if any interesting notable names do get dropped. But something pretty notable, Joe, is Josh Naylor's contract. Now, we've talked in the last podcast about the Mariners signing Josh Naylor. However, we didn't have all of the contract details at the time. Now we do. And Josh Naylor, who has a $18.5 million AAV contract, but that's not how much he's getting paid each year. So let's break it down really quick. In 2026, Josh Naylor is going to make $11.3 million. In 2027, he's going to make 17.3, then 19.3 in 28, 21.3 in 29, and then all the way up to 23.3 in 2030. It's a backloaded contract. That's not uncommon in baseball, but when you put it together with where the Mariners are at in terms of money to be spent this offseason, we thought that he was going to be making $18.5 million this season, whereas instead he's making 11 and we'll call it $11.5 million. That means that the Mariners have a little bit of extra money that we didn't necessarily know. They probably have $20-ish million left to spend instead of having 12. And that's big for this team. That's big for a team that still wants to re-sign Jorge Polanco, that still wants to add to the bullpen, etc. That extra money that they save on Josh Naylor this year, sure, he's going to be making, $23 million in 2030, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah.
In 2026, I mean, the fact that he is making less this year, I mean, he did get a $6.5 million signing bonus, which is not a part of payroll, but it is still John Stanton's money. So I don't know, it's weird, but it's a situation where if you're the Mariners, you have to be pretty stoked that you were able to get Josh Naylor on a pretty team-friendly contract.
The amount of money that we save, we're part of the team, that we save as with Josh Naylor making $11 million, 11.3 in. Sorry, a trade just happened.
Did it?
Braves and Astros. Nick Allen for Mauricio Dubon, which
two
is
guys that were on the non-tender list. Wow.
Topical, Jeff. Topical. $11.3 million for Naylor in 2026. Looking at the contract breakdown, I don't care about the money in 2030 right now. Who knows? By 2030, the Mariners could be running a payroll of $220 million for all I care, with how inflation could work or how the new CBA works. And there's a lot of varying factors here. The thing that matters the most, though, is the $11 million going towards the Mariners payroll in 2026 for a first baseman who is going to be your third best position player, unless you get someone better than him, more than likely, on your roster. I mean, that's a great deal for an age 29 season guy who has a high motor, high energy, high IQ. That's something that's been praised about Josh Naylor for years now, but within the last couple of days for Dipoto in the media and Hollander in the media, one of the highest IQs that they've ever, been associated with as having a player on their team with. Josh Naylor is that dude. And for $11 million, you can't help but not imagine how much more flexibility that presents for them in this offseason specifically. If I'm assuming correctly, I think this puts the Mariners payroll at $141 million presently, because it was at 130. They signed him $11 million. Assuming everything that we've seen online as far as arbitration projections with the expected tender salaries there and all the raises that everyone's getting, etc., are factual. 141 of the supposed 165, 166, they've got closer to 25 million still. Like, that's not a small chunk of change. There are some people that were saying that Josh Naylor could get $25 million a year. You know, there was the people with that line of thinking. Now he's getting less than half of that. I mean, one, shout out to Naylor for understanding, I think, the scope of where they're at presently. If they might need a little bit more help right now because some of the higher end prospects aren't ready. And then in 2027, when you have like a contract like JP Crawford's coming off the books, maybe you've moved Luis Castillo at that point. Like, there's a variety of things that the 17 million, the $6 million pay raise that he gets from this year to next year can kind of offset itself. What I think, again, it's something that we're just kind of reiterating the same point, is he's a winner. He understands what it takes to win. Taking it's not necessarily a pay cut because he's going to get paid the money regardless, but holding off on the money until later. That's a winning move from Naylor and his agent, theoretically, in my head. Of he's allowing more flexibility in the present to allow them to lend them the opportunity to try and go out there and win a World Series next year, to go out there and try and win the West and win the pennant, and then get back on the doorstep and actually walk through the door to the World Series this time instead of standing at the door and then turning around and walking away. This is giving them the opportunity to hopefully add more and be more aggressive in the market than they've been able to do so in years past. And I don't know how many jersey sales it would take to offset the $11 million. I mean, you could run the math, say they're $120 a pop. You do that, like, whatever. There's going to be a significant amount of money earned back for merchandise and, ticket sales. And if they do a specific, like, Naylor's Sailors seat section and, things like that, it's going to, the ROI on Naylor, it's going to pay for itself, it feels like.
I crunched the numbers, Joe. It would take roughly, if they're $120 a piece, which I don't really know how much
they're like 160, but
yeah, whatever. Fine, I'll do 160. I'm doing 160. I'm going back. It would take 70,625 jerseys to pay for the contract, assuming that they keep all that money and it doesn't,
Yeah, there's not there's a revenue split, but semantics or semantics, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. It's crazy that we sit here, in the middle of November talking about this when in July we saw Josh Naylor and we're like, he doesn't really seem like he wants to be here. Like, he seemed pretty bummed that he was, traded, which I can't say I blame him. He had a house in Arizona, was where his wife was, like, and then to get traded to Seattle, but it feels like a full 180 now. Like, he seems to really, really be in love with the city, really in love with the fans and the team, and of course Tucker. And it's just really cool to see, because as Mariners fans, we're not used to that. We're used to guys coming here being like, yeah, all right, and then they leave. Like, we saw that obviously with Teoscar Hernandez. We've seen that in plenty of other, years past, where guys come here, maybe they struggle and they decide, I don't really want to be here, and then they're gone. So to have Josh Naylor basically say, yeah, I'm putting down roots here, I'm going to be here for the next 5 years. I mean, he has a chance to be the best first baseman in club history.
Yep.
100%. Which, by the way, the Mariners are doing their 50-year anniversary celebration all next season, and you can vote for your top 50 Mariners of all time. Maybe Josh Naylor's one of them already. Daniel Vogelbach's on there, so you already know I voted for him.
Yeah, you had to. I mean,
I had to take Matt Brashoff to vote for Daniel Vogelbach.
A worthy sacrifice, taking Matt Brashoff to vote Daniel Vogelbach as one of the top 50 Mariners, greatest Mariners of all time. Colton, the odds on you voting for Daniel Vogelbach in that list, like, minus 50,000. Like, it was as much of a lock as you can get. But quickly, a word from FanDuel. Thank you to FanDuel for being a sponsor for the Hit It Here podcast. This upcoming battle for the Seahawks is against the Tennessee Titans, and it might not be that much of a battle this weekend. The Seahawks are the heavy favorites in this one. The spread for this game is at 13.5 points, so almost 2 touchdowns worth for the spread if the Seahawks were to win. If you take the Seahawks spread at minus 13.5, they got to win by 2 touchdowns or more for you to cash on that. I might stay away from it and might head towards the total over of 40.5. I like the Seahawks scoring a bunch of points in this one, just based on not the greatest week last week against the Rams. Lots of interceptions for Darnold the last 2 weeks. I think a bounce back game is due for Sam Darnold. He will return to form that he was previous this season. The Seahawks money line minus 1100, very much so the heavy favorites over on FanDuel for our FanDuel favorites this week. Remember to gamble responsibly. Now back to the podcast.
In the comments down below, I want you guys to make bets on why Joe's shoulder is now wet cutting away from that FanDuel promo. I also want to give a huge shout out to the guy that hacked our Twitter account. The Mariner Mojo Twitter is still hacked, unfortunately. He keeps asking us how much we're going to pay for it. You know, Joe told him we'll pay you every cent that we have made off of the Mariner Mojo Twitter account, which is $0. So, you know, Joe kind of
they don't know that. They don't know that.
Yeah. They don't know that. They haven't responded yet. Joe did tell them that scared money don't make money. So
that is true.
Yeah. So if you guys get a weird link from our Twitter account, please do not click on it. Thank you so much for being willing to vote for us in this random contest that doesn't exist, but don't click the link. Joe.
Yes.
We have some off-season plans to talk about. Now, our off-season plan came out recently. You guys can go check it out. It's linked right here above me right this second. Nice, get it, Joe.
Audio listeners don't know what you're talking about.
The audio listeners are confused.
Yeah, that's a video exclusive video. No audio for that one, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, you guys got to come over to the YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and like the video while you're at it. But our off-season plans came out where you guys could tell us which of our plans you liked more. And Locked On Mariners has done their offseason plan like usual, and so has Connor, the Couch GM. And so we're going to take a look at both of their plans, see how they kind of fit with ours, and compare the two. Because I think us and Locked On, we're pretty, me and Locked On.
I will say,
we're pretty.
Like, finish your thought, but I have some thoughts of my own.
Yeah, like the Locked On offseason plan is similar to my offseason plan, at least in some of the guys that you add.
Mm-hmm.
But I do find it interesting because the trades are a little bit different. But
yeah. So my immediate analysis on all four plans, mine I think is the safest and takes the least amount of risks. I think yours has yours and Locked On's. Like Locked On's is kind of like a mix between yours and mine, where like they signed Willie Castro, whereas like I signed Luis Rengifo, right? Like I figured that they would sign a Dylan Moore type replacement in that, and Willie Castro is their pick versus mine being Luis Rengifo because Rengifo is a little bit cheaper. I probably could have gotten Rengifo cheaper than $6 million, but I, just sent it on that. But so I think mine's the safest. Yours and Locked On's are the most similar, and I think have the highest like yield, like the returning yield. Like your two teams accumulated the most projected steamer war in that scenario, where like mine's 41.7, Locked On's I think is like 47.7.
Yep.
Yours is like 43.5. And then Connor's, unfortunately, he didn't fully flesh out some of the moves that he made. Like he had, it's a great video, but like it's like a PowerPoint presentation kind of situation where he's like kind of switching through stuff, where he trades Luis Castillo and he trades JP Crawford to free up money to sign the likes of Josh Naylor, Jorge Polanco, and the big fish of the offseason for him was signing Kyle Schwarber to be the everyday DH, essentially, for the Mariners. And unfortunately, steamer projections don't reward the DH position super well. I think Connors is the most ambitious, and I think has the chance to be better than his projected 39.4 FWAR from steamer. But when you take into account he's starting Colt Emerson at shortstop, and he's starting Ben Williamson at third base. He has his catcher or his DH be Kyle Schwarber, where yes, there's going to be a lot of value there, but as far as WAR is concerned, it's not very good. He has Logan Evans as the fifth starter. Like I didn't trade Luis Castillo. You and Locked On both did. Locked On getting Mackenzie Gore for Harry Ford and some other parts in theirs. You got Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins for Logan Evans, Ty Pete, and Charlie Bielenson. Like there's a lot of different moves that happen. Some things that are consistent across all of them is we all acquire a left-handed reliever, which I thought was interesting. There's multiple additions made to the bullpen in all four scenarios. All four of our offseason plans ranging from $163 million to $169 million. There's a lot, I think, that goes into curating an offseason plan, and I think it's good that there's differences but also similarities. Like we all re-signed Naylor, duh. A lot of like you, all the three of you outside of me, I didn't re-sign Jorge Polanco, right?
Mhm.
Um, some of that like there's not really. I'm the only one that kind of like went for an upgrade in the outfield, which I found interesting. But again, that's because a lot of you guys are putting more faith into the outfield than I am, whereas I don't trust the infield as much. Kind of a or opposite of that. I trust the infield more than I trust the outfield. Whereas like you guys are both getting Brendan Donovan, like there's just subtle differences which I think are cool, but ultimately when it boils down to cost per steamer war, the brain trust that is locked on, they come out on top. 47.7 projected steamer F war on 163.6 million is a really good turnaround, getting Tim Herron, Riley O'Brien to bolster the bullpen. Mackenzie Gore, like I mentioned, for the rotation from the Nats. They get Brendan Donovan like you do. Like a good like a great offseason plan from them. I don't know how fully like the trades necessarily shake out, but again, like I think my trade to the Reds where I'm acquiring TJ Friedel and Sam Mole could get declined because the value in Rayleigh and Rivas and like the prospect capital going back of Josh Caron and Ryan Hawks, it might not be enough. But again, that's the beauty of the offseason plan is just kind of you throw stuff at the wall and hope it sticks.
Yeah, I like how we kind of have, locked ons at 163 million, Connor's at 167, you're at 165, and I'm at 169. Like they're all close, but there's the higher end in mine, and there's the lower end in locked on, which, like you said, they got probably more bang for their buck from everything that they did, especially just with how cheap Mackenzie Gore's contract is right now compared to me adding Sandy Alcantara. And so while we both traded Luis Castillo, Locked On and I, they went for a route that's probably a little bit safer, honestly. Going and getting Mackenzie Gore, you'd have him for a few years. Sandy Alcantara was fantastic in the second half. Is he going to be able to maintain that? Who knows? And he's also a free agent at the end of the year. So it's like, there's definitely a little bit more risk in mine in that situation. But I am really glad, like you mentioned, that they're all different, but still very much the same. Now, we made ours before Josh Naylor signed, but we both predicted that the Mariners were going to sign Josh Naylor to an $18 million contract. So that was pretty crazy. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then some of us have Cole Young starting at second base. I've got Brendan Donovan. Connor's got Jorge Polanco. Brendan Donovan can also play the outfield if you need him to. I just don't know how well his elbow is going to hold up. But if you need to put him in right field and have Polo play second and Cal DH for a day, I'm sure it's fine. Like there's just a lot of subtle differences, but overall, I think all four of them are pretty solid, and I think that team wins the American League West.
There's a very high chance with a lot of the firepower that gets brought in that with I mean, again, it's early in the offseason. We don't know where the rest of the American League West is going. The Angels just traded Taylor Ward for Grayson Rodriguez, which seems like a good move in terms of value returning back for them. But how much are they going to get out of their outfield as far as production is concerned? It depends on if they signed anyone this offseason because it seems like they might need to, given that move specifically. You know what I mean? So there are a couple things like when I made it's very reminiscent of the Zips projection graphic that Dan, Dave, I don't remember. Dave Zimborski or Dan Zimborski, it doesn't matter. I don't remember his first name right now. The guy who does the Zips projections, they make like a graphic where it shows like the roster and like how much WAR is accumulated and stuff like that. Like for us or for you specifically, you had Rivas available still on your roster. I didn't. I just both penciled us in for Ryan Bliss. The difference in projected WAR, there's 0.2. Like there are players on these teams that are still within the organization that WAR is not accounted for because it's just a 26-man roster. Like I didn't count Logan Evans's projected point like 4 for mine just because he wasn't on the 26-man. And that's where things get a little muddy sometimes because not every single player is going to make the exact appearances that the projections make up for them, right? So it is a kind of a crude test, I would say, as far as it's a rough draft as far as that stuff is concerned. But I don't put Brendan Donovan in the outfield. You said that. I'm like, no. I'm surprised seeing him at third base for Locked On, because
Yeah.
I don't want to trust. And it's hard because they probably just value Cole Young more than Ben Williamson, which makes sense based on prospect pedigree. Ben Williamson was still on their 40-man roster. They also acquired like David Hamilton from the Red Sox. So like they have insurance policies, for lack of a better term, for second base for them. But yeah, it's just some things, like if you hear the WAR projection, it sounds a little funky. That's why. There's just a couple guys that aren't accounted for in all facets.
Yeah, and obviously we're not going to get every move right. I highly doubt that any of these plans are actually what's going to happen, because it's just not the way it works for us normally. But I think everyone was not shocked to see Josh Naylor re-sign. Brendan Donovan's been a guy that I've been talking about for years, and I think the Mariners have been interested in for quite some time. So that's a move that I could absolutely see happening. And then I think the big question mark right now for the whole offseason is what happens with Luis Castillo. Because if you trade Luis Castillo and you know, don't have that contract anymore, that's a lot of money freed up. So then what can the Mariners go do with that? So there's definitely still a lot of moving parts to this offseason, but let us know in the comments down below whose offseason plan you think was the best of the four of us. We appreciate you guys watching episode 251 of the Hit It Here podcast, presented by FanDuel, and go Mariners.